All right. Good morning to all attending the RTA's special meeting of the Board of Directors. The purpose of this special meeting is to reissue the 2026 budget marks to eliminate the requirement for a fare increase and account for the additional funding from the Senate bill that was passed in the middle of the night last week, Senate Bill 2111. We're going to hear an overview of the bill from our Director of Government Affairs, Rob Nash. I think you all got his 24-page memo or summary, 34, last night. I read it. Before we begin, I just want to express my deep gratitude to the many people who worked to get us to the point where we are today. It's nice to have an upbeat meeting where we can say confidently that in 2026, we will not see any cuts to service. We will not see any layoffs pending our action today. And riders will not see fare increases and instead will continue to see improvements in service. I want to especially thank the governor. I did it in person the day before yesterday. And I want to thank the leaders in the House and the Senate who worked so tirelessly on this bill, although we're all tired because we left the Capitol building at about 5 a.m. on Thursday night or Friday morning. But I especially want to thank Representatives Evadina Delgado and Representative Cam Buckner, that great former Illini football player, and Senator Ram Villavam. These three individuals ate, lived, and breathed this like we all did here over the last couple of years. And to our labor partners, I've expressed this to Nora K. Ryan. I talked to Tim Dre from the AFL CIO yesterday. The labor partners and the staff of all the transit agencies were magnificent. My sincere thanks to their hard work over the last 3 years. And I especially want to thank the advocacy community of riders across the region, from those in the disability community who have been asking for more transparency and better service from us. Your voices, your emails, your appearances at our meetings here in person, your social media, your rallies and trips to Springfield were decisive in this outcome, and you should all be proud of your efforts. And again, I thank you very, very, very much. And I thank the RTA staff who worked just tirelessly on this as well. The bill and the revenue will deliver to the system just transformational things that will improve mass transit. It's not all about the funding, although that's a major component. Illinois now joins New York as the only states in the country with major transit systems that have fully and sustainable funded mass transit. Just us and New York. New revenue, as we've said all along, will not begin to flow to the system until late in 2026. I've said all along, you can't flip a light switch and expect the funding to be there. We will probably have a special meeting on the 1st of June, the day the new law goes into effect. And it will be up until November before we would see any, if we decide to increase the local sales tax, it'll be to November before we actually see the funds. So there's a several month lag. But the new revenue is going to be coming, and it's going to be given a clear direction and has been given a clear direction on how we spend much of it from legislators. And this board still has very, very, very important work to do as the RTA as we know it. I'm eager to get started. So thank you all for being here. And we're here today to jumpstart us, to get us started on the road to continued improvement and sustained funding for the 1.4 or 1.5 million weekday riders of mass transit in metropolitan Chicago. That's about 1/6 of Illinois' population. So guidelines for today's meeting. For those members who are in person, please turn your microphones on when you wish to speak and off when you are done so that we can limit the microphones on to one at a time. I'll call on you with comments or questions that you may have. Um, for those calling in remotely, keep your audio on mute as much as possible to minimize background noise, which may impair recording. And when you have a question or comment, please raise your virtual hand, and the board secretary will call on you and try to remember to put down your hand when you are finished speaking. I want to mention that Leanne Redden, our executive director, is working, but she's remote today from, I believe she has a meeting out of state, but she's on remotely. With that said, I will now officially call this meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority to order. And will everybody in attendance please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance. Flag. States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to hear the action item first, in case I have to leave to go do something of a personal nature, just pick up my wife after a hopefully routine procedure at a local hospital or healthcare facility. So item 4 is it? Yeah, roll call, Joy, so we know what we have for attendance.
And then we also, the statement about the physical quorum too. But anyway, okay, Dr. Alvarez, Dr. Carey,
Here.
Dr. Colson,
Here.
Dr. Gorman, here, Dr. Jenkins, Groven,
Here.
Dr. Jenkins.
Here. I'm online.
Tarek,
Here.
Dr. Lewis,
Here.
Dr. Mondero,
Yes.
Dr. Rotondo,
Here.
Dr. Ross,
Here.
Dr. Ryan, here, Dr. Sager, Dr. Walker,
Present.
Dr. Yonan,
Here.
Chairman Dillard.
Present.
We have 14 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. Now that we have established a physical quorum, and the board secretary has received completed notice from directors Jenkins and Lewis indicating that they cannot attend in person pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, they're deemed admitted unless anyone has an objection. Seeing no objection, the directors may participate remotely, Madam Secretary. Now we'll go on to the first item, which is item 4, an ordinance establishing revised estimates. It's really why we're here today, of funding amounts available to the service boards for the 2026 operating budget. And Malik Veshnov is here. Malik, thank you. You probably have bags under your eyes from your great work, but thank you again for everything. Without you, we never know exactly what the finances are. Bill Lackman and our great staff, and Jill, everybody. Malik, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. A new era has begun for transit in the Chicago region. The General Assembly has taken a major step forward to ensure stable, reliable public transit funding across the system. For 2026, riders can expect no service cuts, no fare increases, and continued improvements to service quality and experience. Building on multiple years of ridership growth, this new funding will allow CTA, Metra, and PACE to increase hiring, improve employee and rider experience, add more frequency, and create a pathway for additional improvements to public safety and reliability that riders have been asking for over the past several years. This is a pivotal moment for our transit's future. In a moment, Rob will walk you through the legislative changes, financial impacts, but first, we will cover the most immediate actions we are requesting from the board. This ordinance will establish revised funding amounts for the 2026 operating budget based on the recent SB 2111 legislation approved by the Illinois General Assembly on October 31st, 2025, the critical first step in the budget process for this year. Next slide, please. I think you can go back 2 slides. There you are. The updated funding amounts, if approved by you today, will have immediate impacts on the 2026 budget process because they will allow service boards to approve budgets that will include no service cuts, including funding TAP and RAP subsidy programs for the rest of the years, no layoffs, no fare increases. New funds will mean opportunities to advance further improvements on service quality and user experience later this year as the new funds become available in the second half of the year, as the chairman mentioned. Next slide. We are asking the board to approve 2026 to 2028 operating funding estimates, which incorporate the new revenue from SB 2011, including a portion of state sales tax on gasoline and an increase to RTA sales tax pending RTA board vote later in 2026. This will maintain continuity of operations funding and avoid cuts to service and fare increases. This will preserve flexibility as new regional funds will be retained at the RTA level. Next slide, please. Expanding on the new revenue sources a little bit, the RTA region can expect an estimated $1.2 billion in new operations funding on top of everything we currently receive from a combination of sales tax on motor fuel and an increase in the region-wide RTA sales taxes approved by this board later in 2026. 5 percentage points of the 6.25% sales tax on motor fuel will be dedicated to transit operations throughout the state, with an 85-15 split with downstate Illinois, generating an estimated $731 million for the RTA region starting on July 1, 2026. Additionally, a 0.25% increase in the region-wide RTA sales tax, which we are already calling sales tax 3, will generate an estimated $478 million for the system annually if approved by this board later in 2026. The RTA board is required to approve this increase within 60 days of the bill's effective date of June 1, 2026. It is important to note that the sales tax will not be matched by the state from the Public Transportation Fund. Sales tax 1 and 2 will continue to receive the PTF matches, and the counties will continue to retain a quarter of the 1% collected in the collars. Next slide. And on the capital side, the RTA region can expect an estimated $180 million annually from interest on the road fund. This will help to make progress on our state of good repair needs in the coming years and ensure the system is better prepared to handle the service enhancements expected with this investment. However, we are not requesting any action to amend the capital marks today. As you know, there are 4 opportunities during the year to make a capital amendment, so we'll come back to you at the later time to amend the capital marks and include this funding in the budget process. Next slide, please. Let's look at the funding landscape for the next 3 years, as the board is required to adopt a budget for 2026 and provide estimates for 27 and 8 plan years. Here you see at the top the existing operating funding amounts from public funding that you approved in August of this year. In 2026, $2.5 billion of public funding is available. Now, the new 0.25% RTA sales tax 3, if approved, is estimated to begin collections at the earliest in August of 2026, and as Chairman mentioned, begin arriving to us around November. That is expected to generate partial revenues for 2026 at $199 million. The 5 points of the state sales tax on gasoline is estimated to begin in July of 2026, again, partially generating $365 million in 2026. Therefore, more than the fiscal cliff amount of funding will be available in 2026, $564 million more than previously approved. And as you can see in 27 and 8, when full annual amounts are available, this will be over a $1.2 billion investment in transit operations. This is really transformational. And again, the new capital funding that you will not be voting on today will be $180 million a year for the region. Next slide, please. So the most critical aspect of why this special board meeting is called today is to ensure that as CTA, Metra, and PACE complete their budget process, that there's enough funding available in 2026 so that they do not have to have service cuts, fare increases, and are able to continue providing RAP and TAP services throughout 2026. Here you see the 2026 adopted marks by service board and type of budget line items. And next to it, the updated proposed marks that we are seeking your approval today. CTA will receive an additional 142 million, Metra 28 million, PACE 19 million. This will allow them not only to close the fiscal cliff in 26, but also cover the gap for taking the fare increase off the table. Additionally, we are proposing to allocate 56.7 million to the RAP and TAP programs, allowing those user subsidy programs to continue past April, when PACE had initially suggested that they could end without additional funding. There is enough funding available for RAP and TAP at this level for us to come back to you in a future meeting to update the monthly ride cap. This amount of funding will allow between 40 to 50 rides per month, but it will require a separate action item later this year, so we can make that possible. We are working with PACE on an implementation timeline. Additionally, as we mentioned, there are no changes to the RTA agency budget, and because in the second half of the year, the transformational new funding will exceed the fiscal cliff needs in 2026, we are anticipating $319 million of additional operations funding available to the region. Currently, we are seeking your approval to keep this as in a projected regional funds line item. We'll come back to you later, possibly with a budget amendment in 2026 as we work with CT, Metra, and PACE on how to bring riders improvements next year. Additionally, a lot of this funding will not be available until much later in 2026. Next slide, please. The RTA Act continues to be the law, and it requires approval of 2 plan year estimates. Staff is proposing that we similarly close 2027 and 2028 funding gaps with baseline funding of CT, Metra, and PACE services. However, the new act, after it's effective, will include a new formula that will go in place in 2027 and requires the new NIDA board to vote on that budget next year. Therefore, we do not have enough information in the first week after this bill has been passed to bring that level of detail for approval today. The new formula, just for everyone's information, will be active from 2027 through 29 before service standards go into effect in 2030. This formula requires all funding, old and new, to be pooled into one bucket. It takes the old geographic formula out and requires that the NIDA expenses and new priorities be funded first off the top, then ADA paratransit. Then it requires that the CT, Metra, and PACE budgets are made whole at 2025 levels. And if any funds remain after that, they are supposed to be distributed based on a new performance-based formula shares of vehicle revenue miles, vehicle revenue hours, ridership, and passenger miles. So this will be a big change that the new board will take on after the act becomes effective. Next slide, please. Additionally, there are changes to the recovery ratio. It's one of the most significant reforms in the bill, where the ratio is lowered from 50% pre-pandemic that has been waived for many years due to the impacts of the pandemic to 25% for 2026 to 2029 and 5% for ADA paratransit. This will be a big change to how we calculate the ratio. It must be reported to the state upon budget adoption. While the penalty for not meeting the requirements is waived for 2026, which is great news, it remains in place for future years. The ordinance also removes most previous adjustments, as I mentioned. This change will make the recovery ratio more achievable in the first couple of years, but then we do see potential legislative remedy needed for long-term compliance. Next slide, please. The ordinance revises the 2026 recovery ratio downward to levels that are achievable in the service board's revised budgets and two-year plans. Therefore, CTA will be set at 20%, Metra at 22%, PACE at 12%, and EDA paratransit at 5%. The security expense exemption is authorized, and the RTA will need to add a regional level credit to meet the 25% requirement for 27 and 8. This approach will ensure that all service boards can meet their financial obligation without resorting to a fare increase or service cuts, and it provides a clear path forward for compliance with state requirements. Next slide. In closing, the entire staff, and I would like to thank you for gathering on such short notice. I would also like to point out one specific individual, Doug Anderson, for the amount of work he has put into these million scenarios that we have been running. The urgent approval of these proposed funding marks will provide sufficient funding to each service board, again, to avoid the service reductions, fare increases, as well as provide for continuation of the rideshare and taxi access programs. Upon approval, the service boards will proceed with public hearings on their scenario 2 budgets, which we required of them back in June. We are hopeful that the rest of the budget calendar milestones can stay intact, leading to consideration of the 2026 regional budget and the 5-year capital program by this board in December. Back to you, Chairman Dillard, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. And Malik, thanks for pointing out Doug, and to the staff I see out there, Michael Vandercreek, I mentioned Bill Lackman, Allison, Brian Lohnberg, obviously Jill, Melissa, Tina Smith. Leanne was with me in Springfield with Rob, and we're calling back, and our staff is working at all hours of the day and night to get us quick analysis, because everybody goes, what does it mean? So they're back here in Chicago cranking away. And I don't want to get into, but I see Kevin's in the back. I'm hiding back there, but Kevin's done a yeoman's job since he got here. Sam from the CTA. Sam, thank you, man. You were down there all the time with us. You're a veteran of just a veteran of transit from Metra and the CTA. But if you're within the sound of my voice, I'm thanking you. I don't want to miss anybody, but Kyle and Anthony, wherever you are listening, and our lobby team. Over the years, everybody's worked very, very, very hard on this. In fact, our lobby team was around sort of helping without compensation during it. So everybody, thank you so much for everything. Questions, comments yes, Dennis, Director Mondero.
Thank you, Chairman Dillard, and congratulations, Chairman. Thank you for your leadership. I want to also publicly thank the RTA staff. I want to acknowledge and thank Governor Pritzker, leaders Abadina Delgado, Cam Buckner, Senator Villavalem. What we did is transformational. I've always dreamed about, as a CTA alum, having our system in Chicago, right, be something like what major cities in Europe and Asia have, right? Like transit that's coming every 5 minutes and reliable and safe. And what happened in Springfield last week is really a major step toward doing that. So we should all be proud of ourselves, of all the individual contributions. And I see John Arena, the Springfield team, kudos to everyone, Mayor Johnson, everyone in terms of there were 10 alder persons that were working the legislature trying to push for transit. So it takes a village, and kudos to everyone for that. Malik, you mentioned that you would invite the service boards to apply for that surplus in 2026. The only caveat to that, though, and I appreciate that money won't start coming in until the latter part of the year, is that $319 million into the last quarter of the year. Having been worked in a service board, it's like use it or lose it. There's all this money that's suddenly coming in, and you've got such a short window of time to use it. And I know that the public will be like clamoring like a year from now, what the heck, they passed that thing a year ago and my buses and trains still look filthy and I don't feel safe, right? And so I would, not necessarily today, but like I would want to find out how the RTA can invite the service boards to make proposed amendments to their 2026 budgets. So that, like, for instance, if CTA wants to like say, hey, we've got a suggestion on as to how to have a more robust security and safety cleaning component. And this is what we would like to do so that way we can figure out how to like front the monies to them and to any of the service boards sooner rather than later so that the public can start seeing the benefits of it as soon as possible.
Thank you, Director. Yes, I agree with you that this work, some of it we have already been doing. I know you all have gone on some tours recently to see the level of investment in Metra and CTA and some of these specific areas that writers have been talking about. So we will be working, the staff is already starting to put something together. So we'll definitely try to bring something to you sooner than later to provide that continuity and ability to scale up. But one thing is clear, even these marks make it 100% clear that hiring, retention, employee experience, those investments should begin as quickly as possible because, again, it takes a pretty long window to get to a point where you can add service or bring on some of these investments that writers will begin to see.
So perhaps we could then have the service boards, if they want to amend their budgets, they should do so like in December? Is that? I'm
So
just trying to understand what we
it
should
would
be
be at
communicating.
earliest in the first quarter of 2026 because in December you'll be voting on the budgets that they will approve first with their boards. Then they will go back to their boards and work with us on an amendment, then come back here. So the earliest we can do that would be in Q1 2026.
Okay. Another question. Oh, you know what? I'll reserve it for a little bit later with potentially Rob. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. And Director Mondero, Nora was down there for a day. Tom was down there constantly. And Director Alvarez was down there. He has other duties as the head of the Latino caucus or executive director, but I think the directors who were down there as well, very important, very helpful. Director Yonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, again, RTA kudos and as the spokesperson today, these are some great numbers that we're looking at. We're celebrating and no question the, last few months, week, the pain that everyone has gone through. I just wanted to, just a little, point of privilege, just go back to how this whole process even started. And I think there's a story to be told there about how the legislature really wanted this region to try to come together and figure out what would be the best way to try to solve this potential fiscal cliff. Back then, we're talking 3-4 years ago, and our Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning was given the task to be able to figure out what it was going to take to forecast a dollar amount. And I think some of that gets lost today as we look at where did that figure come from. And for the effectiveness of our planning agency, where all of the folks obviously represented here, the councils of government, county commissioners, mayors, managers, they were all part of this process of being able to empower CMAP to come up with the dollar amount. And I just feel like that's just one of those things where we just stop and you think that $1.5 million was what, again, legislature empowered CMAP to come up with the plan, and then everyone got behind the plan. And I think, again, for the time when we talk about how parts of government are broken, not willing to work together, bipartisanship, this region did do a phenomenal thing years ago, and today is the fruition of that coming together. So again, just a point of privilege to just go back to the genesis of this and make sure that CMAP also is appreciated in the process as well.
Amen. I mean, Aaron was down there constantly. And also seeing you, President Preckwinkle, who was and Sis Killen was sitting behind me at 4:00 in the morning in the gallery. So it's a massive team effort to pull off something this large. But thank you very much. Yeah, don't want to for CMAP was critical in this process as well. Other questions or comments? Director Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My compliments to all the people who've already been recognized for their good work in Springfield. I think this legislation is interesting, and I like some of the subtleties here. I think over a period of time, we've heard a lot of discussion about security being an issue and looking for new and creative ways to do that. And just a very small thing, the fact that we are allowed to exempt security expense and ICE funding as part of our required ratio, I think that's fantastic. There's no reason why we shouldn't dig in now and go at those two things 100% to improve the rider experience. So my compliments to whoever idea it was to use those two things as an exemption. I think it was brilliant.
And I know some of you and staff went over to see the Chicago Police Department's new technology. Heard on the radio yesterday that, in terms of solving crimes, it's been a remarkable turnaround since they have this capability to monitor platforms mostly, in real time. And the number of actual arrests and solving the crimes has greatly improved. So, but there's lots of security focus as Rob will tell you, in this legislation. Director Kutark.
Thanks, Chairman, and congratulations to you, to this board, to the region. This is a really great day to be proud of Chicago. We stepped up and we did it in our way, and we avoided a crisis. Our peers in other metro regions can't say the same. Some of them fell off the cliff. Lawsuits, real big hardship for families, for businesses. We knew this crisis was coming. The legislature asked CMAP, our elected officials, our policymakers, our planners, came up with a really robust plan. Took 8,000 hours of staff work, and we had something that was really comprehensive, and we went for the big thing. We didn't just say, let's patch a hole. Let's try this the right way. And so for the next few years, we've got an enormous opportunity to deliver on the vision. Like Director Mondero said, we are sort of turning the clock. I was on that trip with folks that went out to Germany to see one of the, the best in class transit systems. And we're at that moment where we're starting to dial over there and to get to that trajectory. Just in the last couple of weeks, we celebrated Navy Pier, 30th anniversary. A gentleman, the late Jim Riley, who sat in your chair, had so much to do. And how much pride do we have in making that a real jewel for this city and the region? And that came through a governance change, something that was hard. And then just 2 days ago, CMAP celebrated their 20th anniversary. That also came from a governance change. We don't talk about cats and Nipsey. I think a line for success is 20 years from now, us feeling that same really good sense of pride and success when we're here 20 years from now talking about NEDA and how well they've been doing. And I think, we were guided by a principle in the short term, and I want to thank every single one of my colleagues that sit here. We made some really hard decisions, and we did it with comedy and trust. We decided very early in this cliff environment that we were going to keep each agency as whole as we could. We had to do some really tough things, some unprecedented things. Maybe we didn't communicate the cliff and the numbers. That was a little clunky, but we did our job. We set a principle that we were going to keep service going as long as we could, to give the General Assembly the time to come in and do the right thing and do the big thing, and they did. And I think we should think about what this principle is for our short time remaining here. And I think that's to set up this next agency for success. And I think that this budget amendment, this ordinance before us starts that process by pooling this funding and really giving the opportunity to the next set of leaders that are going to come in here to deliver on the vision that's in this bill. So I want to commend the RTA staff, but really commend all of you and thank all of you for working together. A lot of people thought, in a crisis we'd be fighting and sort of going after crumbs. We did the opposite, and I think that that's a really good groundwork to start from for the next agency.
Thank you. It's interesting. You never know how much, and having worked for two of them, governors really know and absorb what's going on. But Governor Pritzker mentioned to me just 2 days ago, he knew all about the issues in Philadelphia. So, that was paramount, he said to me, on his mind, is he didn't want to, have us be Philadelphia. So the governor was paying attention. Otherwise, we don't have this success today. Nora, Director Ryan, thank you for everything.
Thank you. And much like everyone, kudos to everyone. Congratulations to everyone. It's really exciting it's been stressful, but now it's really exciting to be here in this time. So one thing that, as we all know, that RTA is going to be replaced by the NITA. And so I think it's our responsibility in this moment to just kind of keep things going to make sure that there is a smooth transition and handoff to these folks. And so I would caution that we not jump too far ahead on stuff that's happening right now, that we still maintain, like making sure that we're moving at a pace that keeps up with the money that we have, because the money isn't coming in all at once. It's going to come in slowly over the course of the next year. And so we need to be very cautious of that. And so, it's like in the bill itself, there is language in there about how things should be handled. Like, for one example, the NETA board will be the one, they are required to work with an independent expert to talk about the existing paratransit programs. And so I think for us to make any changes to any of the programming there would not be in the best interest of the next board, and so like it's up to them to evaluate the whole system, which includes RAP and TAP. And so, I know that there's talk of potentially increasing the rides. I don't think that's up to us to be doing. I think that that's something that, right now we maintain the status quo. We do what we need to do with budgets, and then we set the next group up so that they can make the responsible choices to ensure that what we're doing is sustainable and that it isn't just a reaction to, oh, we found money, so let's go out and spend it. It's like, we need to make sure that we are continuing to provide the customers with the service that they deserve, and that this is a sustainable program for, the next 20, not more than 20 years, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And, I mentioned Tim Dre, but to the employees of all three service boards, but Keith from Amalgamated, if you're listening, we were so blessed to have very distinguished, great employees from the CTA and Metra and PACE around, but the CTA in particular, and they were tremendous witnesses. They were here, but in committee in Springfield, they were awesome. And Tim happens to be the AFL-CIO, but to the other unions who may be listening, great work. And your employees that you brought in as witnesses were, they were credible and shows that we have incredibly dedicated CTA, Metra, and PACE employees every day that are out there. So without them, none of this happens. And they're the face to our riders of who mass transit is in Chicago or Chicagoland. Director Gorman.
Thank you. And without continuing on with the thank yous, thank you and congratulations to everybody that was involved in the process. But I do have a mail question. As we are looking to approve, the proposed ordinance, and you spoke a lot about the revenue, and the operating revenue I still think it's important Director Ryan had mentioned about, just not spending to spend, and that builds upon my question about efficiencies. Efficiencies were found in this process. Will those efficiencies still be maintained in that budget?
Yep.
As opposed to, just throwing revenue at it and not maintaining those efficiencies?
Director, that's a great question. We came up with efficiencies that are applicable to both scenarios of the budget. So
45 minutes.
they will continue to occur in 2026, and we will, RTA will actively track them as we've discussed. But also the bill specifically prescribed a bunch of efficiencies in the language. So absolutely, the cost controls, being able to deliver more with less is still going to be part of this process, and it's not being ripped out of the process at all.
Do you know what that number was? It was,
So in the bill, I believe it's around 47 million,
Okay.
very, very specific. So we have to do some back and forth to align with that language down the road. But our budget's included over 70 million in efficiencies. And as you saw, especially the RTA agency budget, even with all this funding, we are not in this amendment proposing any additions to what we proposed back in August.
thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Director Mondero.
Sorry, Malik, I do have one other question for you. I know that with the new bill, you have budgeted out not only 26, but 27 and 28. But then the bill also includes requirements, right? And so I think that one aspect is that, well, will the requirements, whatever that might be, the task force or future security, end up becoming more costly than the revenue that's coming in? So my question to you is like, is there a plan to come up with a 5-year financial plan that we can get out to the public? How quickly can we get that out so that everyone can see the revenues coming in 5 years? Also, one other thing, want to point out a couple other important thank yous, and that's to the Speaker and the Senate President. So Speaker Welsh and President Harmon, fantastic jobs that they also did in getting it. But since this is a love fest today, I wanted to make sure that we got everyone addressed. So thanks.
And their staffs.
Yeah.
And we met numerous times with both Don Harmon and Emmanuel Chris Welsh, the speaker, and the Republican leaders as well. I don't want to leave out Senator Don DeWitt, Senator Seth Lewis from the western suburbs, a Republican, voted for the package. And then Brad Stevens, the mayor of Rosemont, who is amazingly, has the entire feel for the region because he's a suburban mayor, but he borders Chicago. And Brad Stevens, an outstanding mayor, really grasped the whole situation. So I don't want to leave out and their staffs, but I don't want to leave out the Republicans that focused on this as well, including John Curran, the Republican leader, and Tony McCumbee from downstate, who were gracious enough to meet with Leanne and myself and others throughout the last few years.
Director, to answer your question, you're absolutely right. The new board and the transition process does allow flexibility to determine what level of new investments to make. For example, on whether it's safety and security, transit ambassadors, many other mandates, I would say, that are in the new language, could cost anywhere between, could be capped by the new transition and the board at, I'm just making up a number, 50 million, could go up to 300 million. That will certainly have a huge impact of how much money is left over for the service boards to add new services to our region. So that's definitely something that we'll have to work through throughout 2026 and as transition to the new board. It can completely, over 5 years, potentially eat up the level of revenues that have been provided to us, or give that new board the ability to debate which portions are most important and what level to fund them.
Dr. Carey.
First of all, like my fellow directors, I would like to thank everybody who's been involved in this. It's a tremendous step forward for the region. I have a question. I've been sitting here thinking about it, but you were talking about a budget amendment in the first quarter, but the revenue's not coming in until the third or fourth quarter.
Right. Director, it's completely up to us to work with the service boards, with you as a board to decide when to do that. So my point was that we would not want to bring anything the rest of
Not
this
this
year.
year. I got
So
that.
the earliest time we could bring something would be the first quarter, but you could choose to do it in the second quarter. It's really up to all of us to figure out. RTA board has full discretion on
Mhm.
how to deal with the 2026 new funding before the new formula sets in 2027. One of the issues is that if we can figure out specific investments that are completely aligned with the act,
Right.
that could begin sooner than waiting for the full transition process, we would
Right.
love to bring those to you for consideration. But if the board decides that they would not like to take that on, that is completely
No,
up to
I
you.
think we probably would, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And I just want to make a comment about the bill in general, camping on a little bit, I think some of Director Katarik's where he was going. The funding is tremendous. I mean, it is absolutely tremendous. But we heard throughout the last 3 years, no funding without governance reform. And the governance reform that's in this bill, if you go all the way back to part, you know, there were 3 different ways to go: do nothing, smush it all together, or create an RTA replacement with more authority. And that's the way it went. And I think having spent the last 6.5 years on this board and having been in, number one, RTA works great cooperation with all the service boards. I'm not going to minimize that at all. We work together very well. But there have been times that this board has been frustrated in the ability to do something or make something happen faster. And the new board will have that authority. And it's not just, yeah, we get to make the decisions, but you then will have a cohesive and a much more organized and unified transit system, which is where we all want to go. So,
That's a great point, and I want to give real kudos to what I call the bulldog of reforms, Rob Nash, who, when the Senate passed their version, said, wow, you know, we at the RTA even want stronger reforms. We've been for reforms from day one here. And Rob worked on it to make the reforms that are in the final package even stronger. So I want to point out that the RTA and really much of the language probably came from our staff that's in there. And we have been for reform from day one. My guess is some of you will be on the NIDA board, knowing your relationships with the appointing authority. So while it's a bigger board, a 20-person board, if I were a betting person as I look around the room, some of you will be on the Northeastern Illinois Transit Authority board. But it's bigger, so that's probably good. But I just want to shout out to Rob, who really made sure that the RTA reforms were put in the final bill, and he tweaked them and worked with the legislators on them. So Rob, thank you for making the bill reform-wise even stronger. Any other questions or comments? If not, who wants to make the historic motion and the second that we do this? Tom Kotarek moves, seconded by Director Walker, that we approve this revised estimate of funding for the service boards for 2026 operating budgets. And with that, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Alvarez, Director Carey,
aye.
Director Colson,
Aye.
Director Gorman,
Aye.
Director Groven,
Aye.
Director Jenkins,
Aye.
Director Katarik,
Aye.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Mondero,
Proudly, yes.
Director Rotundo,
Yes.
Director Ross,
Yes.
Director Ryan,
Yes.
Director Sager, Director Walker,
Aye.
Director Yonan,
Aye.
and Chairman Dillard.
Aye, thank you.
14 ayes.
And I want
Two
to
absent.
point out too, Director Alvarez was in Springfield all last week, he's going to be a great addition to this board. He couldn't be here today, but his relationship with especially the Latino caucus is just critical. So Director Alvarez it was nice to see him tooling around Springfield all the time. So that item is approved. Thank you, everyone. It's a relief, I guess, is the way to put it. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but it's nice to have a happy meeting. With that, the next item is item 3. That's the legislative update. Rob Nash is going to be giving his presentation. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Director Bill Colson to run. I'm going to go pick up my wife since I got the high sign from the docs that everything is okay. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you. We have our regular meeting like November 20th, so it's coming up really fast. But thank you, and Director Colson, my right-hand guy here, is going to take over the meeting. And Rob, thank you, buddy. I'll be talking to you early and often every day like I have been for months. Thanks, Rob.
Well, if you have motions, now's the time to make them. He's gonna leave the room.
All right.
Thank you. Good morning. Rob Nash, Director of Government Affairs, and I do not want to belabor the conversation, but I must add my thanks, first and foremost to this board and to my colleagues who have worked hard on this, both in the RTA and at the service boards, but really the leadership of the General Assembly and the individual members who have dedicated their time and blood and sweat and tears to this. Obviously, Senator Villalom and Representative Leader Delgado and Leader Buckner, Senator DeWitt, Representative Stevens, as the chairman just mentioned, and all of the 4 legislative leaders, and obviously the governor. Tremendous leadership as the session continued. My service board colleagues as well, advocates, particularly labor, key to getting this over the finish line. And then I want to mention someone that I think we kind of always just assume, but the appointing authorities. All of the appointing authorities were, I know, deeply involved in the conversations. And I'm sure you guys have more firsthand knowledge than I do on their dedication to this effort and driving it toward a conclusion. And they will continue to obviously have their stamp on this process as they help architect the new NITA board. Next slide, please. Oh, I have it. Talking to myself. You've already seen this slide. I just want to put it up there as just a reminder that while funding is the key consideration that we have talked about for quite some time, just to lay the groundwork for the rest of the structural discussion I'll have, but we do have obviously 2 key new revenue sources that, as we had stressed throughout this conversation, predictability, sustainability are key components of legislation, or excuse me, of revenue. And we do think these offer those characteristics as we begin to plan for the system that we're going to be able to shape with these new resources. Malik also, ran through these items, but there are increases across the board there are proposed increases in the RTA sales tax, and each of the regional subdivisions will get into that timing and conversation, but the board must consider the sales tax increase within 60 days of June 1st, 2026. Next, that's me again. I have too many things to do here. Moving on to the overview of the new board structure and transition process. The terms of the current RTA board members expire on September 1st, 2026. Members can be reappointed under the new structure, as the chairman just mentioned, and NITA board members must be appointed within 120 days of the effective date. So you're essentially looking at the end of September for the appointing authorities to complete their appointments. The NITA board adds 4 directors to the regional entity, bringing it to a total of 20. I'll just run through those quickly. 5 members will be appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Illinois Senate. 5 members will be appointed by the mayor of the city of Chicago with the advice and consent of the city council. 5 members will be appointed by the Cook County Board President with the advice and consent of the Cook County Board. And then 5 members, 1 each from each of the Collier County boards, Collier County executives with the advice and consent of their boards. The NITA board will then select a chairman with a simple majority from among the 20 directors. Finally, and this is an important distinction, and I know our summary had a lot of detail in it, but 17 members of the NITA board will also serve on the boards of CTA, Metra, and PACE. And this was this concept of sort of cross-pollination where folks that serve on the NITA board, which hopefully has more of a regional perspective, will be engaged in the operations, or excuse me, the policy setting of the service boards as well. The executive directors of each of the transit agencies will be appointed with the advice and consent of the NITA board moving forward. And the NITA chair and executive director will also participate in any staff search processes for leadership at the service board level. And then finally, until September 1 of 2030, both the NITA board chair and the NITA executive director must be confirmed by the Illinois Senate. So I'll pause here. I will just note on our summary, I thank everyone for comments, suggestions, and questions that you've offered. It's a large bill. There's errors in the bill that will have to be addressed that we've noted in we think there are errors where some of that cross-pollination didn't occur in the same manner across each of the boards. And so I do anticipate that there will be follow-up legislation to address this and other small items that have already been identified in the proposal. But the structure, I think, generally has been set. I'll pause here before we move into some of the reforms and see if anyone has any questions on the structure as put forth. We'll get into the timing and some milestones too at the end.
I have a minor question relatively. It looks like with more responsibility, it's going to come a lot more work for these new NEDA directors. I mean, you're going to have a lot more, you're going to serve on a service board as well. I can imagine what the board meetings are going to look like. What has the legislature said about compensation for these new board members who are going to have more work to do?
The compensation for the NEDA board has been reduced, I believe, to $15,000, and then those that serve on one of the other service boards would be eligible for an additional $5,000. So it will be significant, dedication of time. Obviously, you can double the number of meetings that you'll have, and then obviously prep or any kind of follow up on that. But the board is asking a lot of its members, but I think the General Assembly's perspective was to seek out and attract people dedicated to transit and transportation policy, and hopefully that comes with a passion to serve. But there's no doubt it'll be they'll be asking more of the members.
Any other questions or comment, Director Walker?
So for the 17 directors who are going to both be NEDA board directors, but also on the service board, who will determine what service board they will be aligned with?
So the legislation identifies the total number of appointees for each appointing authority, and then I guess I'm trying to think of the word, denotes or defines which term and then which sort of appointing slot will serve on which service board. So for example, the mayor will have 2 appointments. I don't want to get into the specific appointments. There are time slots, terms of 3 years, terms of 5 years that will all eventually roll up to the 5-year term. And then the legislation lays out how many are appointed from each NEDA appointing authority to each of the service boards that they will also have to serve on. So it's defined in the statute.
Got it.
It's not left to the board.
Okay.
Director Kotar?
Thank you, Director Colson. There's qualifications for these board members in the statute. Could you talk a little bit about the qualifications? And then there was a change to who is also elected to positions and can serve on the board. That was, I think right now we can't have elected officials unless school board on RTA. And at PACE, you had to be a mayor or a former mayor to be a member. So, and then can you talk about how those both work? So if you are an elected official, do you also have to meet the qualifications? Or if you're an elected official, do you not have to meet the qualifications?
To your first point, I'm going to have to be honest, Director, double check, because my understanding is that there's this interim period, obviously, between now and when the new board is appointed, and there still will be, obviously, eligibility for mayors to be on, PACE in that interim period. But I believe the prohibition on elected officials, other than some of those local bodies, is maintained. So that's been a longstanding, principle that the RTA board operated under. I can double check on the expansion of that list. In terms of the qualifications, I think they outlined a number of, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase it, prioritized characteristics, but I don't know if they were required, right? So understanding and experience with large contracting, transportation policy, I can get you the full list of sort of descriptors there, but they are looking to, I think, propose a series of characteristics that should be considered as the appointing authorities make their selections. I do not think that there's a scorecard mandated in legislation that says this is how you would achieve those characteristics, but there is a preference for understanding transportation policy, large infrastructure projects, large public budget maintenance and management. So I think those characteristics that we have all discussed as helpful to wrestle with these issues were articulated in the legislation, but I wouldn't deem them mandates or requirements.
On September 1, is it, the new board takes over?
Yes, and I have in a couple slides, I have kind of a more detailed list of timeline milestones we can.
And
talk about
the RTA and the staff doesn't just go poof and disappear. I mean, it becomes NETA, at least the staff, right?
I hope not, yeah. But I'd be happy to talk to you about that. No, the existing infrastructure is all transferred over. We'll talk about, there's a whole host of transition issues, obviously over the midterm in terms of potential movement of staff to fulfill new responsibilities of the regional entity board. But no, there's no magic moment where things undergo dramatic change, but to many of the comments Director Ryan and others that have made, the NETA board's going to make those decisions, right, on how they want to structure their staff and how they want to sort of build their team. And so there will be changes undoubtedly, but the infrastructure that is here today to support the system will be there as the new board is named and then as the transition unfolds.
And if this lame duck board, and I guess that's what we are, was of a mind to raise the sales tax, it's better that we do it June 1 than say August 30th, right? Because you want to start collecting the money sooner.
Correct. So the decision on that is obviously up to the board, but the sooner it's decided, the sooner the infrastructure at the state level can be put in place to begin collecting the new revenue.
I think it's almost a badge of honor. We're being fired by act of the state legislature. Not many people can say that. I mean that in a nice way. That's what we fought for. But it is kind of funny. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, and I can get to a few more here.
Okay, you have anything else?
Yes, I'm sorry. I do want to thank Director Carey for noting the policy reforms because we, have been sort of lost in the funding and the revenue, which was obviously the primary concern to protect riders from devastating cuts and employees and the disruption to the regional economy. But the NETA legislation builds on current responsibilities and adds new authority to the NETA board, particularly in three areas: overseeing fair policies and rider communications, establishing and overseeing service standards, and then conduct capital planning. I don't want to just rush past these three buckets of reform. They were the three buckets of reform that the chairman articulated in the beginning of 2025, and really the elements that CMAP in addition had identified as the key points that needed to be addressed to improve the rider experience. Simply the centralization of the fare setting policy and the fare technology at the regional board, I think, is a major victory for the whole region. And that's just one of the components of the proposal. Establishing and overseeing service standards really sounds like maybe a PowerPoint bullet, but it really is a dramatic change in how we're going to distribute funding, and tying funding to the performance of operators is, again, a key evolution in the system and something that people had talked about for a long time. And then obviously capital planning and the participation of the NETA board in alternatives analysis, which is sort of selecting the mode of these major projects across the region, and then other requirements to engage stakeholders across the region in some of those decisions. So the headlines are about the money, and rightfully so, and avoiding the pain of the cuts. But these are fundamental changes in how this system is going to be managed moving forward, and they have been discussed for quite some time. I hope that both the General Assembly and the NETA board, as they work into this transition, continues to highlight other changes they think might make sense. I think there's an appetite and an understanding in the General Assembly that this is a very complicated system, and that it should be revisited perhaps more than once every 15 or 20 years. And so if we have identified some of those issues, I think we have an opportunity to bring them forward. But I do just want to highlight that the reform kind of got lost in the conversation because it was, kind of agreed to it in large part, but it does represent a fundamental change. Malik mentioned the recovery ratio relief. I do think that's important, but just reiterating it here quickly. There is the new funding distribution, as Malik also mentioned. There's a couple of transition periods before service standards are fully implemented, but in all cases, ADA paratransit, debt service, and agency expenses are covered first. And then, as mentioned, the service boards will receive this baseline of 2025 funding levels with new monies being distributed in the updated formats. I can get into those transitions, but suffice it to say, we'll move from 27 to 2032 essentially before we have this service standards model. So we have these predetermined routes on some of the funding, but eventually we get to a situation where just like we set the revenue marks for the service boards on an annual basis, there will be a discussion with the service boards to essentially set service marks, which are a commitment to deliver certain amounts of transit service in every pocket of the region, and a clear understanding of what is expected to be delivered, and then a measurement of what is delivered. And that funding will be connected to those service standards. So again, fundamental change in how we do it, but significant in terms of reform. Finally, I'll close on some key dates and deadlines, and I will I want to thank my colleagues, both in the Government Affairs Office, but across the entire agency. It was a group effort. The bill's over 1,000 pages. There was a lot to try and suss out. We are going to find things that we need to clarify and update as we look through this. You know, we're at about 6.5 days or six days and 14 hours or so from the passage. And so we'll continue to update this and refine, but I think the big milestones have been clearly laid out. The bill does set a timeline and expectations for the transition. There is a tremendous amount of work to be done, you know, really starting today in terms of setting up that transition for success. The legislation has an effective date of June 1st, when a number of key provisions will go into effect. The RTA board must hold a vote on the proposed increase of the RTA sales tax within 60 days of June 1st, as I mentioned. And I must underscore that the new operating revenue from the sales tax on motor fuel and new capital revenue from the interest in the road fund also take effect July 1st, but there will be a lag in that money arriving to the agency. On September 1st, as noted, the terms of the current board members expire, and current board members can be reappointed by their appointing authorities. Also on September 1st, IDOT must have procured a transition consultant who will help, I think, dive in on the front end and lay out a road work on some of the additional work the board will need to consider. And a transition working group is established by October 1st. This will include members of the NEDA board, but also members and stakeholder advocates, labor and others, to help guide the transition effort at the board level. They will also develop a transition plan and an ordinance that will need to be adopted by the NEDA board by July 1st, outlining the transition roadmap. In January 2027, recommendations from the NEDA Law Enforcement Task Force are due, with a vote on implementation of a sworn law enforcement officer program required by June of 27, and a transit ambassador program established by July 1st of 27. In December of 27, the first iteration of the new service planning process will begin, with funding allocations later linked to the newly developed service standards. I just touched on that. And then 2028 begins the process for the development of a unified fare system to be achieved by 2030. The primary driver of that timeline is you know, the centralization of the app technology, which is currently held at the CTA, and the expansion of reduced fare programs and other requirements, fare capping and other free and reduced ride programs take effect fully by 28 as well. There are a bunch of interim milestones within each of those, but to be honest, the new board will have to start setting out that timetable as soon as they convene. And the transition consultant, I'm sure, will help establish that timeline relatively quickly for the board's consideration.
Do you have any idea when the governor's going to sign this bill?
I do not. I'm assuming the normal course of action is that the legal team in the governor's office will take a close look at the legislation and come up with any you know, analysis. And I would hope we could give them the time to do that because, you know, it is a complicated proposal. But you know, our assumption is as soon as possible to be able to allow everyone to begin working on some of this you know, deadline driven materials in advance of the bill actually becoming effective.
Well, I think you or Chairman Dillard ought to attend that signing ceremony and bring us back a pen. Can you do that? We can frame it.
I hope more than he and I are, you know, invited to attend.
Okay. Director Montero.
Thank you. Hey, Rob, can you expound on what IDOT's role will be? Like, they're procuring a consultant, but are they going to have any kind of approval process or?
I mean, other than managing the work of the consultant, which will be outside of this board, which obviously gives them a great deal of control. I don't know on the implementation side, most of that will be deferred to the NEDA board in terms of how the recommendations from the consultant would be implemented. But certainly IDOT will have a great deal of influence over not only the selection of the consultant, but, guiding its scope of work. I think this board, in the run-up to that, certainly can contribute their perspective and insight on the items that should be considered. But there's a lot of decisions that are, at the policy level that I anticipate, the consultant presenting choices to the board as opposed to making decisions.
Director Kotarik?
Thanks, Director. Rob, I'd like to, just for us to consider as a board, thinking about some other key dates to put in there while we're still around, and they're in response to some of the comments that Director Gorman said and Director Ryan is, one, I know everyone's really eager to put out very visible customer-facing improvements, things that cleanliness, safety, all of the things that we know this bill really wants us to deliver on. I think the service boards, especially as we see them in 2 weeks, we should have very clear understandings of what those benefits are, how long it's going to take to achieve them, and really start holding ourselves accountable for the time that we're here. I think that those are doable because we're through the crisis period. So what are we going to prioritize? Quick wins, broadcast them, let the customers know it's a new day, we're on stable ground, and here's some of the things you're going to start seeing right now, and get that public. And I don't know what that right date is, but I just wanted to put that out there. The second piece is, well, that's it. That was the first piece. If I can remember the second one, I'll go to you, Rob, because with 1,000 pages, it's a lot of pieces.
Yeah. And I do want to just reiterate something Malik said. In terms of adding service and expanding service, obviously the service boards have been on a, unbelievable pace to try and add back, operators to expand service. And while there's a whole host of quick wins, I agree that can be articulated. I think additions of service and frequency and coverage, which really everyone puts out as their number one priority, are going to be driven by that ability to get operators into those vehicles. And so, that is an important component. And it is hard to tell people just wait. We're going to get the revenue in the second half of the year, but we do have to have some patience to get that, get those resources in hand. But you're absolutely right. I don't think the timetable of the riding public is the same timetable that maybe is on the slide. I agree that there's an urgency to demonstrate progress.
And I remembered.
Oh,
The second was Director Gorman's comment, the efficiencies. Let's really broadcast those two. I think this is part of the reforms, is really a sense of good governance. There's consistent outside auditing of the work that happens and their performance audits. How are we managing things? How are things getting better? So for those quick ones on the efficiency, either the 47 million, the 70 that we had, what is each service board doing? When are those going to be implemented? Let's broadcast that to the public too, to let them know that this isn't just, the money's here, now we're spending it, but it's prudent and it's cost effective, and we're doing everything we can and getting ready for the next day when we're going to have a lot more ability to start aggregating things up and saving even more.
And there are pressures pulling both ways on the fare. No fare increase, yet we have a recovery ratio pressure. So it's kind of an inconsistent message the legislature is sending to deal with that, I guess. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you, Rob. It's a great feather in your cap as a lobbyist.
Thank you very much for all your support.
Okay, item 5 is the public comment segment of the meeting. Any comments received will now be read into the record by the board secretary. And then we'll ask if there's anybody who wants to testify live.
I'm going to go ahead and read one comment that we've received from Mitra Karas from the Progress Center for Independent Living. Now that the Illinois legislature has passed a bill creating some transportation system reforms and provides for added funding sources for the regional system, we would like RTA's decision makers, whose recommendations are almost assuredly fulfilled by PACE, to follow through with their commitment to reconsider the drastic cuts to the rapid tap programs. On October 1st, the number of rides allowed per month were reduced from 240 to only 30. We encourage the restoration of rides per month. Since October 1st, we've seen paratransit bus problems escalate. This is happening because people have to use paratransit buses more since a lot fewer rapid tap rides are available. So an already strained paratransit is even more strained now. Availability during booking has decreased, pickups come later, rides are longer, and drivers and dispatchers are more stressed. The disability community is calling for the number of rides per month under the rapid tap programs to be increased.
Okay. Is there a Jonathan Haven here who signed up to speak? Jonathan Haven? No?
I can go ahead and read his
Okay,
comment in.
go ahead.
Good morning. My wife is a user of the Taxi Access Program. As we are celebrating this historic win for our region, we in the disability community want assurance that the TAP and WRAP programs will continue beyond March 2026. And in addition, that a 30 ride limit per month will return to the previous limit of 8 rides per day. Thank you. Jonathan Haven, Metra ADA Advisory Board Member. I
Okay,
believe
if there are
that-
no speakers, then we go to item 6, new business.
Director, there is somebody.
Oh, okay, I'm
Alexis-
sorry.
Sorry, there's Alexis Jones.
Okay, please come forward. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I just wanted to say that while I'm grateful for the passage of Senate Bill 2111, my only minor complaint is that we need more new buses and trains right here in the city. We need more new buses on our streets. Uh, pa- particularly the uh particularly the articulated buses that serve the Lakeshore Drive, and also particularly the new train cars that run on our rails. And again, that's all I need to say.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts. Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, then we'll move to item 6. Is there any new business to come before the board? And if not, the next meeting will be November 20th, 2025 at 9 a.m. And note that the service boards and the RTA will be presenting their budgets and it will be a longer meeting. So if there is no further business to come before the public session of the Board of Directors, I will entertain a motion second to adjourn. Director Kotarik moves. Got a second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Well, then we stand adjourned.